Now I'm very happy to host live conference, Ayurveda for self-care during COVID times with questions and answers. What a timely session. I'm so grateful that all our ambassador lineup panelists are Anjali Aparna Knolka, Kiona, Mariko Hirakawa, Viveka Schwartz, and moderator is Felicia Tomasco. So let's bring everybody in. And I'd like to introduce briefly everyone. I think I'll go alphabetically. So Anjali, I just met her like earlier this year during the International Yoga Day campaign. She joined as a panelist for another Ayurveda session. And I just loved her passion and very perky energy she brings in to teaching and sharing the wisdom of Ayurveda. And her, she learned Ayurveda from her father, Arun Deva, who a lot of yoga communities people know and have studied with him. But from her bio, it says, however, she spent most of her young life not aware of the practice of Ayurveda because of being as a first generation American. So I guess she found Ayurveda's value a little bit later, but we'll hear from personally. And Aparna, who has been our ambassador for many years now, since the time you lived in Santa Barbara, you hosted so many fundraising events. Now she lives in Michigan, and she does a lot of Ayurvedic practices, and she has her own line of items. She's an Ayurveda practitioner for 20 years and trained as a Ayurvedic lifestyle counselor through American Institute of Vedic Studies, and also certified through New World Ayurveda as spiritual mentor. So thanks, Aparna, also for joining us today. And Kiona, she also joined YGB as an ambassador since we met during the International Yoga Day conference, right? And I'm fascinated how you came to Ayurveda from being a massage therapist, yoga teacher, and found real balance in life with Ayurveda. So look forward to hearing your story. And then Mariko Hirakawa, who is a major Ayurveda expert who studied Ayurveda for 5 years in India and certified. And she reads Sanskrit, and sometimes when she chants, I'm just amazed. We have common Japanese roots, and I cannot pronounce Sanskrit like her. But anyways, she was a dancer and professional ballerina and a contemporary dancer for so many years. And then she became a yoga instructor for some reason. Maybe she can share that with us later. And in 2003, she landed to study Ayurveda full-time for 5.5 years. It's a Bachelor of Ayurvedic Medicine and Surgery degree in program at Gujarat University, one of the top Ayurvedic universities in India. So she completely immersed herself with Ayurveda and came back to New York and continued to share the wisdom with her flow classes. And interesting, I always find very interesting how she teaches physical asana also with Ayurveda. And finally, Viveka, she's also ambassador for many years now. I met her, I think, through actually Banya Botanical Table at the gala a couple of years ago, when we could do a gala in person. And since then, she was like completely in love, I hope, fell in love with YGB's mission, and she's been supporting us through many fundraising classes. And she's been trained as a yoga teacher by the original founder of Yoga Works, Mati Izrati and Chuck Miller in 2004, and mentored with Annie Carpenter. And she has over 12 hours of Ayurveda training with mentors such as Dr. Shishagar, I hope I pronounced right, Indu Arora, Arun Deva, Anjali's dad, and James Bailey, and has been counseling for many years now. And also, thank you so much, Viveka, for being here.
Thank you.
And finally, Felicia, thank you for doing the moderator work. She just finished the live session with the power of sound amazing, another female powerhouse. So this is the second one today for Felicia. Felicia is our board of directors now, and she's the president of LA Yoga and Bliss Network. And I'll ask Felicia to take it from here. And I'm so grateful that everyone is here today. Thank you.
Keiko, thank you. I am so grateful to you for the way you bring people together. I think it is definitely one of your superpowers that you yourself are inspiring in terms of your commitment and your dedication, not just to yoga, but in the ways that yoga gives to us and that we can give back, not just to the practice of yoga, but to the communities of people around the world that, you know, just the space of what it means to give back and what it means that our self-care is also our community care. And this is so, so important that in terms of giving back, your commitment to giving back to India, to giving back to the home and to the source of the yoga tradition is so inspiring. And I know I am inspired by you from when we first met years ago, when you first started this organization, and in every conversation that we have. So thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for bringing together this really amazing group of women from around the world, some of whom I feel very fortunate to have met, and some of whom I am meeting for the first time in this call on this platform, along with people around the world who are having the opportunity to meet these people. I feel like we could spend our whole day just talking, but we only have an hour, and we have some really deep, deep, deep wisdom to share. I know for myself, as a practitioner of Ayurveda, I cannot imagine my life without these practices. And I am guessing that the 5 women who I am currently sharing this space with might feel the same way. And I am delighted to be able to ask some questions around not just the times in which we currently live, but how the practices of Ayurveda impact your lives. And through your sharing, your vulnerability, your authenticity, that we can touch and inspire others, the people who are with us around the world today and the people who are going to be watching this hopefully again and again. So thank you all for having this time together. So the first question I would like to ask is, you know, what has changed for you? Have there been any changes, and what are they in your self-care practice, in living in this era that we're in right now, which is currently the time of COVID? What are you digging into in terms of your self-care practice, and what tips and tools from that practice would you like to share? And I'll just kind of start calling out your names for each one of you to answer. And please, I am not going in any order of importance. You are all equally important in terms of your voice and your presence in the world in which we live today. So Mariko, would you, share something with us in terms of your self-care practice, and especially in these times?
Wow, thank you so much, Felicia. Lovely to meet you. And when I first, when I encountered coronavirus, I was in India itself, and I actually was stranded in Jaipur for about 4 months. And luckily I was in my partner's home. And so I really got to see India in a whole new way. I've never seen Jaipur so free of pollution and all of that. But because we were all quarantined, I think that the fact that Ayurveda is a home medicine is huge. So, in the kitchen, there's all the spices that you could, people just naturally, women in India naturally understand what the spices do. And so it's just when you get a cold, you have tulsi, it's growing in your garden. And so what I love, when I was in India, it was just like great to be able to pick the fresh herbs, and make a tulsi tea for myself, and really like draw from nature's bounty. And when I was an intern at the Ayurveda University in Gujarat, I witnessed really the magic of plant medicine, I mean, unfortunately in the United States, we just get the processed, which is still wonderful. But when you really get directly like pick right from the leaves, I feel like their power, you really are touching the intelligence of nature. And so, and I think that part of my daily routine was definitely taking a walk and communing with nature, and seeing the peacocks and all the wonderful creatures that seem to have taken over the city, right, while all the cars were not running. So, and I still keep that up to this day, because I think living in New York City as I'm now, it's just a place that's known for being the city that never sleeps, that's always cut off from nature. And it's so easy in the digital era to just get completely disconnected, but just touching a tree or seeing river, sky, there is that, you touch the prakriti, the nature, mother nature energy, and I think that is so restorative in itself. So personally, I think it's really including nature time for myself, and also breathing practices. People think they have to know so much of herbology, but I know that with coronavirus, it's so much of it has to do with the srotoshodam, the clearing of the channels. And so immunity seems to naturally get boosted when the subtle microchannels are clear. So for me, that practice of Ujjayi pranayam, the Bhastrika pranayam, the clearing breaths, like Kapalabhati, have been huge. And I teach it to everyone, because you don't have to understand anything about Ayurveda, but you just feel the benefit right away. It's like immediate gratification, and you feel lighter and energy boosted. So that's those three things: time in nature, I think, pranayam practice, and really just going to my, like, food is my medicine, having those things in my kitchen. I think those have been really like going back to the roots of Ayurveda, and I think that has been my lifeline really in these times.
Well, Mariko, thank you so much for sharing that. It's like when we can think about these times, it's also how do we stay rooted in the real integrity of the practice, right? In the breath, in the kitchen medicine, in nature. And these are so many tools that are so important to us. So thank you for reminding us. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I also think it's about being in the present. So that breathing just anchors you in the present, because all the anxieties of uncertainty, I think the breath really is like that connection to the present.
Absolutely. Kiona.
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 Yes,
Can you say it again for me so I can?
Yes, Kiona.
Thank you, Kiona.
Yes.
Kiona, what would you like to share about your self-care and utilizing Ayurveda during this time?
Thank you. Yes. A lot of what Mariko shared, I resonate with. Excuse me. During the pandemic, it definitely took me out of my routine of, being in the car, traveling from San Diego to Los Angeles to see clients. So I was really able to tap into nature and take advantage of walking in my neighborhood and learning more about my surroundings. And that was really valuable for me, because we have a lot to take advantage of here, a lot of trails that I wasn't taking the time for prior. So what I've noticed is it's kind of forced some introspection, which has allowed me to really go deeper into my self-care practices. Really spending time caring for myself out of necessity, realizing also how sensitive I am. And, when there were not a lot of cars driving around, and, I wanted to be out more because it was more peaceful. But then as time went on, I noticed that, I was really feeling the anxiety like riding on me. I mean, to the point where I would typically be perched like, on the couch, and, the windows here, and, there wouldn't be a lot of activity, but there's a school close by. And when school started back, I wasn't ready for the activity in the neighborhood. I remember saying like, it just felt like it was loud to me, but it wasn't loud and, offensive, but I was like, oh, it's just, this energy is so loud, it's picking back up and I'm not ready for it because I was so about, really being inside. I took a lot of advantage also to kind of reorganize my home, getting my sanctuary, appropriately set. My kitchen specifically is what I'm speaking of. Like I went through this whole thing about reorganizing the pantry and making sure I did have those staples, the spices that I needed. I even went in and I did some really in-depth work and would like take myself through, like a 21-day practice of, doing a specific breath work, meditation practice, and doing my abhyanga every day, the things that I wouldn't do typically every day, but I would kind of fall in and out of. I spent some concentrated efforts and reaped the benefits because I knew I needed it, and I could tell when my nervous system was kind of getting a little too stressed, like vata vitiation. I was like, no, I got to bring this back. And, that's what I also sharing with a lot of my clients and asking them as well, how are these practices helping you? I wanted to hear from them also, during this time. I was very specific about it. Like, how is this helping you deal with the uncertainty and, the extra anxiety that we're all feeling in some ways? And, leading by example for my community, my family. I wanted to really make sure that I was doing my due diligence to walk the walk and not just say, this is what you should be doing. Also staying on top of my meal times and my sleeping and waking. It's like I had a little more flexibility because things were changing. My teaching was going more, on an online platform. So I was realizing, whoa, I have to be more structured because my vata tendencies were like, oh, I can just do whatever. And that wasn't helping. So, really just putting the practices into, consistent daily practice and having some non-negotiables because I could tell, what was happening to myself. And again, without the distraction of leaving the home, it was just like right in front of me. And one of the practices that I would have to say that I would like to share, something very simple and easy, is giving the ears some love, to kind of, do the external oleation on the ears. And, I do some auriculotherapy practices. So that's the ear acupressure. And, those organs are in Ayurveda. So I do share that a lot and try to really apply it. I use the ear seeds. But when I do feel kind of anything coming on in excess, I go to the easy things. Like, what can I do that is not going to overwhelm, and that's what I like to share, like what practical tools can be applied that, you can be anywhere and do this and, take some really complete breaths, and it's pretty, immediate relaxation can come about. So, that's what I really like to share. It's like, what can be done? Sometimes people are a little like, oh, I all these practices, and it's like, I try to say, don't try to do everything every day. I put myself through that sometimes. It's just, because I know I could handle it, but thinking about what can you be consistent with? Here are some practices that you can do that won't overwhelm. And let's just talk about consistency and small bites. But I again, the nature bathing, I think, has been really instrumental in keeping me at peace. And, if it just gets a little too busy out, it's like, okay, let's go down into the canyon, go on a trail walk and commune. I just went on a friend of mine, a neighbor friend, took me on a walk the other day, and I just discovered or she showed me a new trail. And I said, I needed this change of scene. I needed a new one to really feel it and have that immersion. It was beautiful. So yeah, just really communing with nature and taking advantage of the environment that we have access to. It's been beautiful.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you. And I love the every time you kind of talked about the ears, I was like, oh, I have to do that right now. That it's so good. And I think what you spoke to with such great wisdom and clarity is the immediacy of certain practices, right? There's some things that you can do them in an instant without any special equipment even.
Right.
It's like you can have your seeds, you can also have your hands.
Absolutely.
And the beauty of that wisdom. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anjali.
Thanks, Felicia. Karen, I love that. I wanted to touch my ears too. Gosh, I really resonate with what you've both shared. And I think similarly for me, one of the practices that I really took on in the lockdown was to go out every morning. So as we know in Dinacharya, right, we are aligned with the day and night cycles of the day. And it's so cool to read all of the circadian rhythm research that's coming out now, because we're learning more and more that we have these circadian genes everywhere in our body and all of our organs. And so if we are able to come out and see sunlight for 30 minutes in the morning, it gives such a beautiful boost to all of our organs, all of our cells, all of our processes. And so I've been trying to really make it a practice to go outside. And, I live in a busy cityscape, which I think some of us do. So I don't always have this beautiful nature that I do right now, but just to be able to watch the sunrise in some of those days where we feel contracted and claustrophobic and a little bit more inward in our homes, it was such a beautiful to just rely on, like, right, the sun does rise every day and I can watch it and I can be with it and it's impacting my body and it's giving life to my organs. There's something just so special about that. And I think similarly, I really took on the practice of Swedana. I think when the government of India issued some of their standards for Ayurvedic protocols to use during COVID, Swedana really stood out to me, that we can use a facial steam to help bring and open up those channels to help protect them, especially for using aromatic and antimicrobial herbs like rosemary, eucalyptus, right? If we're steaming with that on a daily basis, or, when you come home from the grocery store and you're nervous, maybe that you were exposed, to just use that really simple, beautiful practice to bring you back into yourself, but to also give you this like medicinal purpose. Right, that these kitchen herbs, like Marika was speaking about, give us such a beautiful opportunity to use our kitchen, use our spices, use our herbs, hopefully things that grow around us. Like rosemary is another one that grows all over LA where I'm at. And you can just go for a walk down the street, pick a few sprigs, place it in some water, and use that really traditional practice of Swedana to help open up our channels and to purify them as well. And I found that also taking that into a full body bath and like actually having the time to do my full abhyanga, my oil massage, and then take a really warm bath and let myself soak in that, that was something that I did maybe once or twice a month before the pandemic. And now it's become, because of the drought, I have to be more conservative, but it's become, a weekly practice for me now. And I start my day that way. After going outside, watching the sunrise, doing an abhyanga, taking a bath. And because my commute to the office is very short, I can just kind of walk into the next room and get started with my day. And I think, just like both of you have said, I just want to echo that these daily practices, they're simple, but they're so powerful. And when we can actually help ourselves find that groove and find that rhythm, it makes such a deep impact. It's like rewiring our neuroplasticity. And I'm a big fan of that. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm definitely getting a theme here, right? That there's this theme of tuning into the environment around us and even finding nature within a city, right? That there are those places where we can find the unexpected, like the new trails, the seeing the sunrise, the going outside first thing in the morning, the watching the sky, that even in crowded places, nature is around us and we can tune in. I'm also getting the Abhyanga theme, right? That oil massage, that grounding vata, that calming the nervous system. and the benefit of these kinds of practices and the importance of them is just so essential. Viveka, what would you like to add to this? What are some of the things that have worked for you during this time?
Yeah, there's been a couple of things. I want to, just to shake it up a little bit, also offer the perspective of being a parent to the discussion, because what I've noticed in my 3 children was a real mental health decline due to the pandemic. And I think we've all felt it to some degree. So there's 2 things that I noticed and that has propelled me to change my regimen of Ayurvedic self-care practices. And the first thing I noticed is the misuse of senses. For me, moving from teaching yoga in person in studios to moving entirely online had me glued to my screen for onto 8 hours a day. And so noticing the increase of the strain on the eyes and continuously looking at a blue screen. And, you know, sometimes you move to your mat and move, but most of the time you're really planted on your butt, talking to the screen or to people on the screen. So that was an overuse, an excessive use of the senses, which affects our mind. It's not just straining our eyes, right? So it increases anxiety, it increases depression if you look at a screen for too long. And so my new practice that I implemented during this time was the yogic practice of pratyahara. I had to really make an effort to pull away from what's coming in from the 5 sensory organs. And, you know, having 3 kids at home during COVID, and they're all in their various rooms, trying all to get on Wi-Fi while I was trying to teach Zoom on Wi-Fi, was so stressful and so a sensory overload, sensory stimulation was just going crazy. And so, yes, the theme of going outside for sure, moving the eyes away from the screen, going outside, letting your gaze wander, but also practices such as, you know, palming and eye exercises and eye pillows so that your eyes can relax, or you know, little pads with ghee on the eyes. That was a big one for me. And then the other thing I noticed in my children, in me, and my clients was an increase in tamasic energy all around. We all felt heavier. We all felt an increase of lethargy, some hopelessness, some feelings of, how am I going to survive this? You know? So any tool to increase sattva, right? Any tool, whether it's Abhyanga or nature, those have been discussed already quite a bit, or Anjali, aromatherapy for sure. I totally rely on that too. But also pranayama, Marika, you mentioned pranayama, and then also mantra, whatever tool you have at your disposal to move out of the tamasic mode into a lighter mode. So the quality of guru, which is heaviness, and making that a little more towards lagu, which is lightness. And in terms of the yoga practice, for some of us, that meant get off your butt a little bit more, you know, a little more rigorous movement, a little more of the pranayama practices, maybe not only Chandra Vedana, maybe not only an alternate nostril breathing, but, you know, things like Kapalabhati and breath of fire. I think that was already mentioned. And then food, of course, you know, eating foods that take us out of a more tamasic state, and maybe avoiding more alcohol, and maybe avoiding some of the heavier meats and dairy, so that we cultivate the sense of lightness, the sense of coming out of the darkness. And so a doubled up commitment to move out of a heavier state toward a lighter state, and a doubled up commitment to draw on all the tools, not just single out one of them, but like Kayona, you said, you know, we have to use many different methodologies in times of an emergency like this. We really have to draw on all of them. But for me personally, it's pratyahara, just pulling away from what's coming in through the senses and not relying so much, like not reaching out to the external world in order for us to feel good, right? Because challenges will always be there. And right now it's a bit more than just a challenge, I would say, but still, if we continue to rely on feeling good and wait for outer circumstances to be just right, that may never happen. So we have to draw on our inner practices, and that's my share. And the last thing, and I know Aparna and I may have talked about this in the past because she also has teenagers. And by the way, I love you, Aparna. And I wanted to say that giving up the sense of control or thinking that we are in charge of our children's mental health, because honestly, I could drive myself crazy. I can only do so much to encourage them to get off the screens, to move their bodies, right? But I can't physically pull them off their chairs or out of bed, So you encourage, you do what you can, you be a good example. And then you have to also let it go and trust that they will understand, that their actions and their habit patterns eventually, impact their well-being. And yes, there's some teaching involved there, but anyway, that's my contribution. Thank you.
Viveka, I think that reminder of pratyahara is so important, and that reminder to come back to finding our own inner wisdom and really evaluating our use of the senses. Especially, we can see the gift of being online even in this moment, but maybe all of us kind of spending some time with an eye pillow or palming later might be a good practice to just even things out in terms of taking care of our senses and our eyes. So thank you for that beautiful reminder. And Aparna.
Hello. Hi, Felicia. So good to see you.
So good to see you. It's been so long.
Too long. And Viveka and Anjali and everyone, but I know Viveka and Anjali and Felicia and Kayoko. Wonderful to hear your voice several minutes ago. I went to India just when COVID started in 2020, and I was only there for 10 days. And I came back on one of I believe the last flight out of Mumbai. And I remember I had my Nasya bottle with me on the flight. And about every 2 hours, I just kept applying oil to my nose and drinking hot water. And there were a lot of people coughing and sneezing and all sorts of things. There were just maybe 1 or 2 people wearing masks at that time. And for me, life didn't change that much because I was already working from home, and I still am and likely will continue to do that. And I had already been on Zoom for years before the pandemic. And so, Viveka, I know exactly what you're talking about with the fatigue of the eyes and just so much just staying really close to a screen. It's just exhausting. The practice that sustains me the most is meditation. I would say from 2020 until about 2 months ago, I've taught more meditation to more people than ever before. There's just a growing interest. And what I found is that I don't know when things are going to change or get better, or what better even means right now for the world, for us. But what I realized is that I have the capacity to go within and connect to that peacefulness within myself, and the even bliss and joy sometimes. Because that already exists within me. And so when I practice the meditation each day, twice a day for 20 minutes, I know I can go within and experience that. The things that I want that the outer world cannot give me, I know I can give myself. And in many ways, I think coronavirus taught us how connected we are. and continues to teach us how connected we are, in how quickly it spread and all the ways it's impacted our lives. And it also can remind us, or at least it has reminded me, that I am responsible for how I feel, and I'm responsible for going within to cultivate that peacefulness from within. And then I can handle what life throws at me to the best of my ability. And the other practices like Abhyanga, of course, and asana practice, being in nature. I also took up acrylic abstract painting and gardening. And I found that to be so nourishing and sustaining. And I could just get lost in the world of plants and roses and painting. Right now it's winter here in Michigan, and so all the plants are in, and everyone except me is overwhelmed by how many plants I have in the house. But there's a certain vibrancy and energy to plants, and that those sort of like silent, right brain, slower, going within type of practices are just the most nourishing and blissful, I would say. So as the world changes and all these amazing transformations happen on a collective level, which we can know from all the Vedic astrology, transits and planetary phases and all the things that are happening, we only need to ground ourselves and cultivate our own wisdom and peacefulness. And I find that that's the most, for me and for my clients, the most reliable way to be, because we can't really control what's happening outside in the world, because the things that are happening are part of this greater collective shifts that we need as a human consciousness rises. So in the meanwhile, we do what we can to elevate our own consciousness.
Well, Aparna, what you've said really ties together what everyone has said too, in terms of the going within, connecting with our wisdom, not waiting for the moment that's outside of ourselves, and the intelligence of nature. I was really struck by Mariko began with that, the intelligence of the plants, and you're describing, winter where you are, that you have brought all the plants inside. So, we bring nature with us. So many of you have offered wisdom that is deep and applicable for so many people right now. But the question I want to ask kind of just adds a little bit more to this, and will be, again, we could go on and on for hours, but we'll just have time for everyone to answer one more question, which is, do you have any practical tips that you want to share for people, especially who are experiencing anxiety and stress during this time? Viveka mentioned the mental health piece. So what can we do? What tips can you share using Ayurveda for addressing that stress and anxiety? So we'll just go in the same order. Mariko, if you'd like to start us off.
Yes, I love all the shares. They're so rich, and I'm just feeling so filled up. But I love also the reminder about we call it ati yoga, the overuse of these senses, and the relationship between that and pratyahara. And I think anxiety means we are negatively projecting into the future, which the mind is always looking outward, and it is known as ubaya indriya. It is the instrument that has the ability to create action in the world, but also receive knowledge. And so I've been really thinking about, like, what is it that makes us experience ourselves as an individual, and yoga has this amazing map of the psychology of yoga, of just seeing that we have this chitta, we have this manas, which is the sensory mind connected to all the five senses. And then we have the ego, the ahankara, which identifies, with all these senses. And then we have the buddhi, which is the discriminator. And we have the memory and all these dimensions of our psychology. And so I feel that we don't spend enough time really studying the mind also and observing the mind. And I guess this is more in the domain of yoga than perhaps Ayurveda, although Ayurveda has huge contributions to make in psychology too. But I've started simply just to observe the space between thought and thought. And what Aparna was sharing with meditation, I think that is, it seems so simple, but absolutely revolutionary, because when you can experience, observe a thought, and then another thought, and the gap between, you realize that you're really an individual feeling anxious only when the thought is there, And just right now, the thoughts are so fast that we can't, see the gaps. But I think that's the beauty of practices like pranayama and like meditation, because it slows us down enough to really slip into those gaps. And in between thought and thought, we're pure consciousness, we're unlimited, we're universal. And we tend to think that we are this person that is separate from the individual is somebody solid who has a thought. But actually, I've come to realize just through kind of simple experimentation that the thought and individual are actually one. And when you don't have a thought, you're actually universal, So for me, it was like a radical, like aha moment. And I was like, oh, if I just stop the thought, I never get so I have that power to actually stop the thought. And so I think, again, pranayama is such a hack for that, because people always complain, I tried meditation, my mind is running 1,000 miles an hour, and how do I stop the mind? And I think there's a kind of a misconception that we think we have to stop the mind to meditate, but we can also simply watch the thoughts, and then the thoughts begin to subside. So for me, it's all this, and then it's like, how do we get calm enough to be able to slow down enough to to be able to perceive, to become subtler enough to capture those spaces between thought and thought, So I think all those vata calming practices like the abhyanga and taking the bath and the svedana, I think really helps to physiologically begin to ground ourselves enough to be able to slow down enough and become aware that a moment the thought arises, because I think that's where all the change starts, is with awareness. And awareness happens between thoughts,
Yeah, and awareness does happen between thoughts. And I think there is sometimes a misconception that we have to stop our thoughts in order to meditate, or that's what being good at meditation means. But there is that observing, and through that observing, seeing the spaces between, and all the vata calming practices we can do to support that. So, so beautiful to walk in that subtle space. And I think there'll be so many good sharings on this topic. Kiona.
Yeah, I totally agree. As soon as Mariko said that, I was like, yes, the awareness, and observation, and really learning to speak to Ayurveda, really learning about the 10 pairs of opposite qualities. And if that awareness is elevated for an individual, then I believe, and I try to share, that it makes even interacting with others make more sense. It's like, understanding, that, we're all individuals, yes. But, there could be reasons why, maybe boundaries aren't being, practiced, healthy boundaries aren't being kept, or, just misunderstandings. But I think it does all go back to awareness and observation. And, how can we describe what's going on to understand how to apply the opposite qualities to promote balance? That's kind of my introduction when I try to start to teach people about how to apply Ayurveda to daily life and work in that practical way. It's like really get a grasp on that concept of the opposites balancing.
Yeah, and I think that's so powerful and so foundational too, in terms of the opposites balancing. And I love the way that you really take these teachings and bring them to such a practical and connected place. So thank you. And it just feels like all of you sharing are just kind of riffing on each other and adding to the other pieces, so that there's this connected conversation across time and space. So Anjali, I'll pass it over to you to add to this conversation around these pieces of reducing anxiety and stress and grounding and finding those spaces.
Mhm. Absolutely. I'm really interested in trauma and how it affects us, how it lives in us, how we explore it. And one of my teachers recently spoke and said, it's kind of like we're in a trauma tsunami in this moment. So much of our samskaras are coming to the surface, and we see it collectively, societally, politically, environmentally. There's quite a lot, right, that's coming up to the surface. So of course, we're having this reaction. Of course, we're anxious. And I think, to come back to some of the grounding in that, our vata pacifying foods, our sweet potatoes, our, soups and stews, of course, those are really important. Cutting down the coffee, which for me personally is always hard, but really important. And, to step into a little bit more of that mental space, I always come back to the Brahma Viharas in Buddhism and those heavenly abodes. And I love this idea that, our joy can inspire others' joy, or I can build more joy from another's joy, right? In mudita. So sometimes I'll call up a girlfriend and just say, what's the best thing that happened to you this week? Or what's the best food that you had this week, right? Just a little simple joy that you experienced in your life that I can take in and savor and digest and make my own joy from it. And I think that that's particularly important right now because we are so isolated. We were in a loneliness epidemic before this, and now I think we're further into our isolation. And as social mammals, this is really strange for us. Our nervous systems are not used to this. So to find just really simple, gentle ways to connect with and find joy and find love and find compassion with one another. Sometimes I'll just call in friends and say, did you do your Abhyanga today? And just that little reminder can be really helpful. So simple, practical, but also making it playful. I think we need that right now. I often think anxiety is when we stop daydreaming. All of our thoughts about the future really just start to become worried, planning, holding on to, grasping, attaching to something that we want so strongly. And when we do that, we lose our ability to daydream, to go to the furthest place that we can think of. So an invitation to bring in that play back into your life, I think, is my practical advice.
I feel like, Anjali, I want to start calling you up, and because if you feel like this whole kind of inspirational joy, like dandelions kind of, like going out into the wind. So that's so powerful. And I think if all of us had those moments where we called up the people that we know and shared some of our own joy or invited them to share their joy. And in a way, that's, what Kyoko is doing with Yoga Gives Back, is even watching the success stories and watching the stories of the people in India whose lives that we have impacted, that we may never meet, or some people have met, or, how we can do this with each other, how the personal and the planetary are connected in so many ways, and how our daydreaming that is joyful can impact us positively is just really inspiring. Viveka, what would you like to add to this conversation or encourage people, especially since you brought up, those pieces of mental health earlier?
Yeah, for me, the most important thing is to not stigmatize mental health. I think it's not talked about enough. I don't think it's shared enough. If I had more courage, I would maybe more openly talk about my children's mental health struggles, but I'm not quite there yet. It's obviously very personal, but you're not alone. I mean, this is apart from Ayurvedic practices, but you're not alone. And just like you just said, Felicia, share your joy. We have to share our pain too. I think it's really important to share what we're going through with others and not try to bottle it up and push it down, and really talk about it and get help. get help and talk to other people that may be experiencing the same. And then maybe more from the Buddhist tradition, also remembering impermanence. It's not going to always be this way. You know, you're moving through something, you'll come out on the other end, you will feel lighter again. And Anjali, I'm also really interested in trauma and trauma-informed yoga practices. So resourcing, right? Touching earth and telling you and reminding yourself, right now I'm safe. Right now I'm safe. Right now I'm able to breathe. Right now I have food that I can eat. Little things. And maybe also gratitude practice. Maybe just remembering, I do have a bed to sleep in. Not everybody has that. I have a home. I have an able body. Not everybody has that, you know. I think that's something to remember, I think. And then of course our mental health very much improves when we have an established routine, when we know when the body can expect food, we go to bed at the same time every night, and we don't burn the midnight oil, and we rise up with the sun, and remembering that we're not just part of nature, but we are nature. We are nature.
Well, and we've talked about nature from the beginning of this conversation, right? And we've talked about circadian rhythms, and we've talked about all these pieces, and you know, everyone here has shared these gems from different perspectives. And Viveka, it's also this piece that I'm hearing you say around authenticity, around not just, you know, skipping over something that we're feeling, but really sharing the depth of it and being honest about it and being vulnerable and being honest with ourselves, and also finding others to share it with.
Yeah, very,
you know?
very important. And the last piece, in terms of Abhyanga, and we all know how important it is to give yourself, whether you have a partner or not, that piece of self-love, right? That piece of self-touch, and how calming it is. And if you do that, I want you all to take Aparna's products for Abhyanga. And I know she's going to hopefully mention her products.
Well, thanks for that great shout out, you know, because everyone here is, you know, someone who also, you know, sees clients and does amazing work in the world and has some pretty powerful resources to share. So I do hope everybody watching has a chance to connect with, you know, all of these very powerful practitioners and teachers and product creators who are just, oh, I'm inspired by every single one of you. And Aparna, handing it over to you from Viveka's great shout out. What would you like to add in terms of this piece around stress and reducing anxiety through the practices of Ayurveda?
I think it's really important to look at fatigue, levels of fatigue that everyone is carrying from COVID and the Zoom and the children in the home and God knows what other things are coming our way that we need to face. If we're not invested in good sleep hygiene, I think it just adds more vata to our already vata world culture. And I find that when people are worried about the future or tomorrow or their job or getting COVID, they spend a lot of time on watching the news and reading more about this or talking about it. And their sleep is affected, they're more fatigued. And the more fatigued we are, the more easy it is to fall into anxiety and fear and worry. So really creating some tender, loving sleep rituals, like soaking your feet in some warm water, can really like draw that energy from here down, you know, into our feet, and maybe applying some oil to our feet and spending, you know, 5 minutes on each foot, really massaging the top of the foot, the bottoms of the feet, and taking some time to just be with that and turn the lights low, maybe put the phone away and play some beautiful chants or mantras or even just beautiful music, and let the world be, because once again, we can't do something about everything that's happening, but we can have our own presence, the sacred presence of the moment upon ourselves, I think it will make, I know for myself, if I feel anxious about something, I don't think somebody else can help me with it, but I can do certain practices, and I can, as Mariko was saying, to really, and Felicia, you too, like going into that. What is that? I'm going to be with that thing, with that feeling, with that anxiety, and layer down what's underneath that, And ultimately, we will get into that settled place, because our true nature is that settled, peaceful state. And we're happiest there, we're healthiest there, and it feels good. So if we can reach for some of those feel good experiences and not project into the future, I do believe that life is for us and life is not against us. But it has taken me many, many years to really understand the wisdom of that. So I can't expect everyone to just buy into that and say, okay, I won't have any anxiety because life is for me. Life has never been against me, because there are times we do feel that things are going against our desires. And so if we can do some of these simple being present to oneself practices, especially at night. I know for myself, when I've had anxiety at night, I'm not doing things, I'm not washing dishes or cleaning. Suddenly I'm quietly within myself and with myself. And now all these things can rise in the mind. All the worries about all the different things I used to incredibly worry about. I was very good at it. And so when we know we have that tendency, and we can apply some of these beautiful practices, even taking a bath at night or moon gazing, if the weather is good, just sitting outside and taking in that energy of that nighttime cooling soma type of energy. There's so much here for us, so many tools and so many ways of reconnecting. And if we can just make a little commitment to ourselves and know that anxiety is more on the surface level of the mind. But if we go into the deeper, subtler regions of the mind, there is peacefulness and groundedness and stillness. And we can learn how to get there, because most of us are not trained. And I wish we would all be trained in that from a young age. You have these 5 layers, your 5 koshas, and let's teach you how to dwell more in the inner koshas and experience yourself from the inner koshas. That would be so beautiful. So yeah, I think sleep hygiene, getting lots of good sleep, good rest, I think will help a lot with that ungrounded, anxious, free floating mind that's everywhere. And I really like massaging my feet with oil and soaking them in some warm water. It's anybody can do this. Everyone has olive oil and a big bowl and hot water. Yeah.
Thank you, Aparna. And speaking of that fatigue piece is so important. And so many of you have spoken to that from different perspectives. And it goes back to that place too of, making sure that we're honoring each other and honoring practices and even honoring ourselves, that sometimes, as many of you mentioned, we need more activity, especially if there has been a lot of time at home. And sometimes we also need rest, that we do really need both. And all of you have mentioned practices that people can do at home. You can at home, massage your ears. You can at home massage your feet. You can at home take a hot bath, do the steam with different plants that you might even pick. You can meditate. You can meditate without necessarily having to just make your mind go blank, but just to observe, just to feel, just to find the spaces in between. I really want to thank all of you for your generosity of sharing what has worked for you and tips and advice for other people, and for your generosity in being part of this day at Yoga Gives Back. And I really hope that everybody who's participating with us today has the chance to connect with all of you individually. I know that you are all actively teaching and actively practicing Ayurveda and actively offering your gifts to the world. And the world needs these gifts always. And we all need to continue to inspire each other. So thank you to each and every one of you. I'm honored to be part of this conversation. I am honored to be part of giving back to Yoga Gives Back, and for all of us to be in this community of uplifting each other. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was so wonderful. And I'm so grateful that every one of you is our ambassador and sharing this wisdom with everyone, and also giving back today to India and helping more than 2,400 women and children. Some of you know when I was saying like 500 or 300 lives, now we are supporting more than 2,400 women and children. So let's get to 1 million one day with everyone's support. But it was so wonderful to hear all your wisdom. And you know, sometimes people think Ayurveda is like very, very difficult, or like very, you know, something far away from me. But actually, it's true. Like a partner said, everyone has olive oil and hot water, right? So maybe just start trying something small and feel good about that. And maybe that's first step for all of us. We need to take care of ourselves to go to the world and do something, right? To make this world a better place, or whatever we want to do. So thank you so much, everyone. And have a good evening. Thank you so much. And this session will be shared as a replay with everyone till the end of the year. So there's time to digest more. Thanks so much, Felicia. Really appreciate it.